Morning, everybody. Welcome to Red Mornings. Carl and myself here again, getting ready to enjoy our morning coffees and Bloody Marys / Caesars. How's everybody doing in the crowd? It's like it's a stand-up routine. Hey, what's with airline food? Um, we were going to keep it fairly simple today. Goddamn, I lost the topic list. But I know the first one is just basics of lifting. And so we were just talking before this thing about how you're switching over from compounds and how I actually got on compounds. So how you doing, by the way?
Yeah, I'm doing well. A little bit of hungover, but nothing that the Bloody Mary and like a pseudo English breakfast won't fix.
Oh, that would be nice.
I'm kind of the blood sausage, so I went with some other type sausage, and it's kind of because you talked earlier that you have a thing for cheap chocolate. But my thing is, I have a thing for cheap ass baked beans. Like it doesn't taste like proper baked beans unless it tastes like a little bit of lead got into the can.
Oh, that's awesome. I actually have the Heinz barbecue in my thing right now. It's actually not a bad idea. I might take you up. I might do that myself.
It's kind of weird because I almost never eat before like 6, 7 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just intermittent fast all the time. But Saturdays are becoming the only day where I eat before 6 o'clock, just because I start. And first we do red mornings, and then we do the Red Man group. And I'm drinking through both shows. And when you start drinking early on, you kind of want some food in your stomach. Otherwise, I'm going to be completely sloshed by the end of the taking call sections on Red Man group. And I can get kind of obnoxious when I'm drunk.
That's my favorite part about you, though. Even when you're shitting on me, I gotta admit, though, the idea of Bloody Marys and Caesars, awesome idea, because, like you said, if you haven't eaten yet and you want to have something to drink in the morning, at least that has some calories to kind of keep you somewhat going. I keep switching back and forth to uppers and downers here. I should maybe save the coffee for Red Man group.
Yeah, I think you should stick with a scotch or two. I mean, you're much better on the Red Man group when you have a couple of drinks going.
Yeah, but that's the problem. Then you got this mystery method thing where you got your crutch. I can't run night game unless I'm drinking.
Well,
I gotta learn how to be scathingly pithy when I'm sober.
Yeah, I think it's just much easier to just drink all the time. It's a crutch. No, it's fuck. It's fine to have crutches.
I gotta get started though. Oh yeah, so if you guys don't know, Carl's here this time, but the next 2 weeks he's going to be away, and I'm gone either next weekend or the weekend after. So we're going to be without for a little bit here. I get to go meet my brother's new live-in girlfriend, so it'll be pretty nice.
Yeah, but why would he go for a living girlfriend? Why wouldn't he just keep her at a separate place so he can still have hosts over?
I have no idea. This is what I'm all going to find out. Because I'm not going to lie, he was in his early 20s and he had 2 girlfriends that were a couple of years apiece, and they split up for whatever reasons, probably because they wanted shit and he didn't want it. But then he just went single and went hard for like the last 7 years, which was awesome. Like, as much as you tell your stories, I'd say he's about on par with you for that. He was a Tinder and Bumble machine. He's kind of like the 6 foot tall white version of me with an afro, so he does very well for himself.
Yeah,
but from what he tells me, this one's from what he tells me, this one's got some money behind her, so maybe that's why he wants to keep her.
Yeah, that could be a good plan. I mean, get himself some sugar mommy cash going.
Which is funny too, because it's not even that he's broke. He has a fairly good, like, 6-figure plus job working for a bank down here. So, but I guess we're kind of going off topic here.
Yeah. So with the lifting, I just got to do the intro. I think we both lift, and I think one of the reasons why we bring up lifting so much is that it's kind of the bottom line requirement. And Ryan was mentioning before we went on that, he's surprised, about how many guys are kind of empty on the basics. And lifting is important not just for your look, it's also important for your health and looking like you're actually well put together. That way you can actually wear a shirt and not have the shirt wear you.
I like how you put that one. Yeah, the buttons trying to hold on for dear life look. Hated that.
Yeah, or the shirt is real baggy because you have no shoulders to hold it up.
Oh yeah, that's got to be something you're looking forward to now. Now that you're out of the States, you don't have to buy shirts in tent sizes.
Yeah, I mean, it gets more expensive because you can usually, if you need a car cover, you can just hit up Walmart or Old Navy and get like a Gore-Tex jacket in size. What the fuck happened?
Just buy a suit from Walmart, cover your car with it.
That's probably the only thing a suit from Walmart is good for.
Yeah, I love it for toiletries and that. I'm with you. I'm not really a big fan of it. But yeah, you're right on lifting. So the one thing I do suggest though is that it's really hard for guys. Like I get it. Some guys don't even lift. They should lift. They know they should lift, but they don't lift. And I get the mentality there where you're sitting at home and you're like, all right, I'm just going to do this and then go lift. But then when you do that, you're like, well, maybe I'll just have like one game of Fortnite or whatever. And then after that, well, I should probably eat first because I don't want to go to the gym on an empty stomach. And then before you know it, it's 7 o'clock at night. You haven't done anything. And then you feel really bad. And and it's funny too, because I've had clients that have that same problem. And I just suggest to them the same thing I have, because I'm one of those out of sight, out of mind willpower guys. As soon as I sit in my house, I don't work out. So I put my gym gear in my car when I was driving to work. So then on the way home from work, I stop at the gym, and then there's no chance of me slipping into that different mental model of like relaxing after a hard day, even if I was tired.
Yeah, I do a similar thing. I just I keep my gym bag at home, and my gym is right near my place. So I just have that sitting right inside the door. So when I walk in, I just grab my gym bag and then I go back out. So I don't even sit down.
Yeah, so you basically have a system then, as opposed to like, so you don't have to have the motivation to go to the gym. You just have the discipline, and everything is set up. So if you just go with the flow, you'll end up having the healthy habit.
Yeah, and I think it's just after a lot of guys fall into that, okay, I had a hard day at work, I'm going to relax mode. But once you start relaxing, it's really hard to get back into that productive mode. So it's easier to just keep going for an extra hour or two just to get the gym in.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I noticed too, a lot of guys in the States, and here too, now that they made weed legal, it's like really killing people's ability to go to the gym.
Yeah, because if you go home and you have a joint, you're not going to go to the gym after.
And that's the thing I can't figure out. So my buddy's one of the most productive guys I know. He basically smokes weed now. It is legal in Canada, specifically because he's stressed out because he has high stress job, high stress life, 2 kids. So he just does it to de-stress, and he actually works out high all the time, which is the weirdest thing. Is that like, have you seen any studies on this? Is it like drinking, where if you try and drink and work out, your metabolism and your coordination are all messed up and it ends up hurting you?
I don't know. I mean, I've never had a drink before going to the gym. Like I used to know a guy, he used to get sloshed, and instead of going to an after party, he'd hit the gym.
Really?
But I'm not the guy I'm not gonna hit the gym after like 7 to 8 drinks.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like I remember when I was in barracks, I'd have a drink, a pre-drink, quickly go get a pump on at the gym, but that wasn't a real workout. That was just stupid bro workout. So you could look in front of the mirror and do that little flexing arm thing. But I couldn't imagine doing that off of any more than one.
Yeah, but I've some of the guys in chat are saying it too. They know guys who smoke before hitting the gym all the time, and I'm thinking it might not do that much of a damage if it's not the typical let's sit on the couch weed.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are some strains that are supposedly it gives you energy. I've never tried one of them, but I don't know.
Oh, is that the ones that are? Because I know there's the THC and the CBD. It's the ones that lean towards the CBD side of things, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not that into it. I just know that I know some guys say they're more productive on weed. I just never saw that. It tended to be, if I get high, it tends to be the only 2 things I seem to, well, there are 3 things I want to do. I want to watch movies or play video games, eat food, and get high again.
Dude, for me, I want to go to sleep.
So I'm not a big fan of that, but if that works for you, go for it.
Yeah, no, it wasn't my thing. I'm kind of glad once they made it legal here. I liked trying it when I first got out of the military, because it was like, screw you, Dad, you can't tell me what to do. But then they made it legal, and now I don't want it anymore. But I don't know. I'll maybe try it one time on the workout, because I've told you the story. I got hit by a car in 2011, 2012. Can't remember the exact date, but I basically have like permanent arthritis in my right hand now because of it. And so it's really affecting my workouts. Like I have to wear hooks every time I go to the gym on any back day.
Yeah, I can see that one. So that would be an issue. Like I had the same thing with the disc in my lower back. So I more or less had to lay off anything that involved my lower back. So that's no deadlifting, no Romanian deadlifts. And you're surprised at how many lifts use your lower back for something, even bench pressing. If you want to get like really good push through with powerlifting style bench presses, your back is really involved in that.
Oh, so that makes sense then why you're kind of switching more to isolated movements now. So that way you don't have to put those kind of strains on.
No, that's not really the reason why I'm switching is just I've been a mainly compounds guy for a long time. And the reason why I think compounds are a great way for beginners to start out is that you kind of learn the good form, you get the most bang for your buck because you're hitting more muscle groups at once, and you don't have to do large volumes. Because like if you do like a heavy, like my 5-5 workouts, when I do them based on compounds, probably the shortest workouts I do, because like a back workout there will be something like rows, deadlifts, maybe another row variation, some pull-ups, and that's kind of it, plus some bicep work. But like now I'm doing a lot higher volume and I'm doing 3 times 12. And if you're doing, like I found with, especially with some of the heavy, like deadlifts and squats, I don't really like doing them high rep. Not so much because they're taxing, I can deal with that, but more because your form tends to slip with them when you do high reps. It's easy to keep strict form on a deadlift for 5 reps. It's much harder for 12. So if you get sloppy at the end, you'll end up hurting yourself. So what I tend to often do, like now I'm in a volume cycle. So now I'm doing high volume and I'm doing a lot of isolation. I'm going to do that for 3 months. Then I might switch back to doing more compounds for about maybe 3 months, doing more of the heavier compounds again. And I just kind of rotate it, because one thing with compounds is that you also end up your stronger muscles compensate for your weaker muscles, so you don't get even aesthetic development. And a lot of us, it's like I'm not lifting because I have some aspiration of being in the world's strongest man or doing powerlifting.
Right.
It's mostly based on wanting to get laid and look good. And then there's the aspect of wanting to be strong enough to handle normal tasks, like it's not heavy if you have to carry something. So for that,
you don't want to huff and puff up the stairs.
Yeah, so I'm thinking more do some isolation to bring up lagging body parts and try to build an overall better physique for, let's say, let's take deadlift, for example. You have some guys who are they don't get good glute activation, for instance, on the deadlift.
That was my problem, actually.
And if you don't get good glute activation, you have a problem at the top of the lift, and you're also not going to build any muscles on your glutes.
So your lower back has to take a lot of that stress.
Yeah. So what's better for guys like that would be to kind of do something where they can activate their glutes properly, and then work into the deadlift. Like I found that if I want maximum activation, I'm much better off doing lighter Romanian deadlifts over regular strict deadlifts.
Well, it's funny because, yeah, I went a different direction than you. I'm still doing compounds, but I've switched to alternative ones. So for your example you used there for the deadlifts and squats not having glute activation, that's what kind of screwed up my SI joint. I've switched since then to goblet squats. So it's a lot less weight, and I find it's once I get over a certain threshold of weight, it's when the glutes stop activating. If I keep it somewhat lighter, they actually activate more, which is funny because then I'm feeling it so much more intensely with a lighter weight, just because I'm actually doing the form properly and not injuring myself.
Yeah, but that's one of the things I think you have to learn with an injury, that you have to lift with your body, not your ego.
Oh yeah, the guys that just keep talking about numbers.
Yeah, the guys like I bench press 415. Yeah, you had a quarter rep and you had 3 spotters.
Or you're bouncing it off your chest because you're 20. Who cares?
Yeah, so kind of my thing with it is just stick with, like, I've had sessions where I finished with, let's say I was doing bicep curls, where I was doing drop sets at the end of a workout, and I ended up using a 5 pound weight or something near the end, and you feel kind of ridiculous standing there doing curls with and straining to do 5 pound curls because you just burn that muscle into the ground.
Right. I used to feel bad, but I've had a couple LBGs that are in my building work out at my gym, and they actually do the lifting with 5 pound weights. So I kind of feel like, yeah, once you're at that level where you have to do the drop sets, and once you're at the very end, you're at soy level of lifting, and that's your body's way of telling you you're done for the day. Buy yourself a bike.
Yeah, yeah, probably. And I think, well, in that case, I think the bike might be good for you if you're doing like something with quads or something so you can get some blood flowing through them. Because I'm noticing I'm getting a lot less soreness from leg work after I started walking everywhere. I think it just has to do with blood flow.
Oh, that's right. You were in the States. You obviously didn't walk when you were in the States, but now that you're in Europe, it's probably more. Yeah, it's awesome. It's the one thing I love about living here. But here's the funny thing too. You're talking about cycling. So I don't remember if I told you this story before. I was in Montreal and I came from Victoria. They posted me down here because I wanted to try something new. I was kind of getting bored with what I was doing in my career already. So typical Victoria guy, I'm cycling to work, not knowing that Montreal is like the cycler's graveyard. And so I track my runs. You have the GPS on your phone. You're doing the Sporty Pal thing. And I remember all of a sudden one day I woke up for work and I go to put on my clothes and I'm like, I can't move. And I look down and I realize I'm stapled to a stretcher. I'm like, oh, this isn't good. It turns out about 2 or 3 blocks from my place, I got, so from what the cops tell me, because I don't remember any of it, I got doored by a car. And I had 2 fingers severed. So, and for some reason, I still had my phone on me. So I call work. I'm like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to make it in today. I think I just got killed. And the boss thought I was joking with him at first. I'm like, no, I'm stapled to a stretcher right now. I'm not even sure why they're letting me call you. But and then I called the old lady and I told her. She panics, comes down to the hospital. And they were reattaching 2 of my fingers because I guess they had gotten severed. That's where the arthritis came from. But I haven't ridden my bike since. And because Quebec has no fault insurance, they basically considered it, well, it's not your fault. It's not his fault. We'll give you 1 or 2 surgeries to put it back together. But that was it. Like no suing, no insurance payout. I was like, oh, that was my first experience in Montreal. And this year is the first year since then that I'm actually going to start cycling again. Because I've had to get over that PTSD on it.
Yeah, just be careful and don't get the other hand fucked up.
I know, it's my artist hand. I can't draw at that point.
Yeah, that's one thing, but you wouldn't be able to lift either. You'd have to take both your hands off and just get hooks put in place instead so you can start to keep lifting.
Yar. Wow, hooks. Did you get that from your time in the Navy? No, it was afterwards, the Belle Provence. But yeah, typical granola stuff. So what do you do then? Do you do cycling or do you do like wind sprints, HIT? Like what's your cardio stuff, or do you even bother with that at this point?
No, I just walk.
Oh, fair enough.
I try to get 15,000 steps a day. And that's pretty much my cardio. I might get on a rower sometimes if I want to try that out. But it's not like I have a set thing for cardio. I just do. One thing I want to try at some point when I'm going to cut is something Stan Efferding talked about. That when they were cutting for competition and they was training with Flex Wheeler, they would do 2 a day really high rep weight sessions instead of doing cardio when they were cutting.
Oh, so they turned their workout into a cardio session.
Yeah, so they do like 30-second rest, 20 rep squat sets and shit like that.
Oh. And
so that would be fun to try at one point.
Yeah, I think I could be good. The one thing I used to love, and I got to find a racing track around here, one of those 400-meter running tracks. I called it the hardest kilometer you'll ever do. And you just take that 100-meter stretch and you just sprint it, and then you walk back and you do 10 sets of that. It's like a 20-minute high-intensity workout. I loved that thing. The dogs loved it too because then they got to run with me. Plus, it's humbling when I'm like sitting there sucking on wind and the dogs are bouncing around thinking it's like a great old time.
Yeah, so the thing is, I'm just going to chat and ask, like, how are you getting 15,000 steps a day? And it's essentially, it's just, I never use public transportation or a car unless I absolutely have to.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're in a bigger city now too, aren't you?
Yeah, so I don't have to use it, so I just walk everywhere.
You have to in a big city. Even here, like we have a car, but more often than not, if it's less than half an hour walk away, just the having to get down, get the car out, just to find parking. By the time all that's said and done, it's usually about the same time as if you had walked anyway. And then you don't have to worry about buying parking and then somebody hitting your car. It just makes more sense to walk.
Yeah, and one guy here, I know some guys who work in warehouse environments, and they can do like 35,000 steps a day.
Just for walking? Just for walking back and forth at work?
Yeah, because if you're in a huge warehouse and you have to go from one side to the other, and you do that 15 times a day, that stuff adds up real big.
I can see that. Reminds me of when you were, I think it was you talking about diet a couple months back, where you said take your standard fat body and just have them cut out candy, booze, and like chips and Cheetos and that kind of stuff. And just that alone will probably get him about halfway towards his goal.
Yeah, I think
kind of reminds me of that, just walking around during the day.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I'm trying to do is just I'm trying to set myself up in a way where it's effortless, where you don't have to put a lot of attention into your diet. It just kind of works for you. So one of the things there is getting a lot of steps in, because if you're burning like 3,500, 4,000 calories a day, it's kind of hard to eat that much unless you're going hard on the let's call the standard American diet. If you go on the standard American diet, 4,500 calories, that's not called a daily calorie, that's breakfast. Jack is asking me, I did try Stan's vertical diet. It's great. And even my diet program now is partially based on that, with a lot of red meat and rice.
What's the vertical diet?
Oh, it was this thing Stan Efferding came up with, and it's a diet mostly based, and it's kind of complicated in some sense, but it's based on getting exactly the micronutrients you need and the macronutrients and calories you need. So his approach was, okay, if you have to eat 10,000 calories a day for, heavy bodybuilding.
Right.
Okay, that's a lot of food to pack away. So you end up getting indigestion, you get gassy, you get bloated. There's one case with Brian Shaw, the world's strongest man, sitting on the toilet while eating a pizza just to get his calories in.
So what does he do with it? He switches to like higher density foods?
No, what he does is he basically went with, okay, what's the most easily digestible protein source? And that's red meat. In Stan's diet, ideally steak. And then what's the easiest to digest and most calorie-dense carbohydrate you have? Okay, that's rice. And very few people have problems digesting rice. That's why when you eat Chinese food, you're hungry like an hour later, you're hungry again, because the rice is just easy to digest.
Yeah. Is that the same as its GI or?
No, it's a bit different. And then he has some. So you get your calories and your protein mostly from rice and steak, and he throws in like a potato or a sweet potato with one of the meals just for some variety, and also to get there's some kind of micronutrient like vitamin C or something he wants to get in there. And you eat a little bit of carrot, I think, and a little bit of orange or something every day, just to get some fruit for the liver. So it's really formulated to give you everything you need, and also to be able to take it in massive, massive volume for like a type bodybuilding diet. But what I adopted from it, like most of my protein now is red meats, either steak or ground beef or lean ground beef, depending on what kind of calorie requirements I have, and most of my carbohydrates come from rice.
Right, which makes sense. Doesn't have any of the gluten problems that that has.
Yeah, and then what I do with that is I just intermittent fast, like between 16 and 20 hours a day most days.
Oh, I am surprised. I did not know about intermittent fasting for so long. I think I was probably 34 before I figured it out. That's got to be the most wonderful thing, because I remember when you had helped me get my diet on track here from, was it like 6 months ago? Yeah. You were talking about tracking the calories, and it was funny because you were right. It turns out that candy was filling up an extra 500-600 calories out of my diet for the week that I shouldn't have been eating. But then I would do the fast, and your fast cuts out an entire day's worth of calories, so 2,000, 2,500. And it's amazing then how it like opens up your diet for the rest of the week, even with just a 1 day fast.
Yeah, because what I do is like I've always had I hate the whole 5, 6 small meals thing. That's just way too much time spent on eating.
I agreed.
So I kind of have a preference for like at most 1 to 2 meals a day anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm not a huge fan of breakfast foods. I'm not a huge fan of lunch foods. So that means I can have a big ass dinner, which is my favorite meal of the day. I can have some drinks with that or some snacks with that, and I can still stay reasonably on track because you're eating more. In my case, I burn about 3,000, 3,500 calories a day. And it actually takes a lot of work to hammer away 3,500 calories in 4 hours.
I'd say I can imagine you being one of those guys that has to stick a couple tablespoons of olive oil in every meal just so you have the calorie content.
Well, most of the time I get the calorie content anyway because I drink too fucking much. Oh, I don't drink too much. I drink just the right amount, but for calories I do. So, and I like beer, so I'm not a huge fan of like drinking. I like scotch, but like most of the time you're going to go for a beer more often than the scotch, especially if you're doing stuff with work or with clients, or if you're out with your buddies. You're not going to sit down and sip a scotch. You're going to have a beer or two.
Dude, that's really common too. So in the military, we had beer lockers. That's the one thing the Americans loved about the Canadian Navy. We have a pop, one of those pop machines, and it's filled with beer, 30 cents a beer, and that opened 24/7, 365. I think they might have shut it down now. And it was funny because you'd come down any time of the day, and the rule of thumb is 2 beers per man per day. But the captain kind of knows what's up, so all he does is check the count. How many junior ranks do we have? 150? Okay. Is there more than 300 beer out of beer stores disappearing? No? Good. But what happens is Pareto principle, you got 20 stokers, that's Hunter's old job, would just get hammered making beer pyramids all day. You'd come down after working a midnight shift and see them having a party every day. It was really annoying. But they would never, like opening the liquor cabinet, the hard bar stuff was always like not on. You would get charged for having an ounce of alcohol, but you could have 8 beer that same day and nobody would care. And I can't figure out the difference.
Oh, there isn't one, but it's also the whole thing with like when you're out and you're running a lot of game, you naturally end up with like if you do 6 dates in a week, you're going to have 1 or 2 drinks at all of those dates. Because like one guy asked me like, how would you close a girl who didn't drink? And I was like, that's never happened to me.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. Yeah. What do you do if a girl doesn't drink? And we were both looking at her like, you know what? The issue we've had is a girl who's like a binge alcoholic, not the other way around.
Yeah, my biggest problem is she gets back to your place and she's drunk as fuck and she throws up in your bed or something.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell that story. I don't want to get this channel demonetized. That's happened a few times, though.
To get us back on topic with the lifting thing again, I think what you need to focus on is have a target you want to reach with it. Like if you want to be one of those guys who, if you want to do professional bodybuilding, by all means do it. If you want to do strongman or powerlifting, do that. But just know what you're training for and what your goal is and have a shorter term goal. Because a problem I ran into myself when I was starting out is like I would program hop a lot.
Yeah.
Like I'd be on a 5-5 and I'd see a new bodybuilding program and I'd jump on that for a couple of weeks and then I'd jump over on something else again. And you don't get any progress that way. So just try something out for 8 to 12 weeks and see what happens.
Well, that's why I love Strong Lifts 5x5. And we suggested to every new married guy on the Married Red Pill who is coming in to complain to anonymous guys about how bad his wife is. The thing I love about it is because everything is spelled out. Like you even got your periodization schedule. So, you know, day 1, day 2, you're lifting 10% more, but it quantifies everything and it makes it the most literal way you could possibly lift weights. And I love that. So like now I just do 8x3s and then 2 different exercises per general body movement. But yeah, and you're right, because if you switch too often, so if you go from bench press, I know my bench gets to a certain level, and then I go switch to maybe incline flies or whatever. I never really get to compare these apples to orange comparisons. So I never know if I'm getting stronger. I never know if I'm getting weaker or if I'm able to come back the next workout with the same level of strength, or if I need better rest periods. Because yeah, you don't have that apples to apples comparison.
No, you don't. And I love strong lifts, and I also love starting strength. They're both really similar programs, and I just think it's a perfect way for a beginner to start out. And I did strong lifts 5x5 for fucking years. And then it's just recently now that I've changed it up a bit, and that's mostly because I found this guy called Mike Israetel, who works with something called Renaissance periodization, and he came up with some different things based on science for hypertrophy and, the number of sets you do. And I figured, okay, I'll try and bring up, because you know what benching chest is? That's the guy who's done a lot of flat bench pressing and has fuck all chest because of it. Because you don't get good chest activation on the bench press a lot of the time.
Yeah,
you don't
shoulders
build
and back.
Yeah, so it's a lot of muscles working. So if you switch to, like, I saw massive gains in my chest when I started doing dumbbell incline bench pressing.
Yeah, those and dips I've noticed have been huge.
Yeah, dips are great. I noticed dips most of my triceps.
Really? Interesting.
But I think it depends a little bit on your angle and a little bit on, and that's what I kind of switched off compounds for, because I started to notice that some of my muscles are stronger than others, and they compensate for different muscles. Like if I do flat bench pressing, I notice my front delts and my triceps are doing a lot of the work instead of my chest.
Yeah, same.
So I decided, okay, I'm going to start doing some more isolation. I figured if I'm going to do isolation, I'm going to start and I'm going to do a full body program. Just because I can't get to the gym much more than 3 times a week, and if I'm going to do 3 times a week, I would rather do full body and get the increased muscle protein synthesis and stimulate muscle group 3 times per week instead of once for legs and twice for the rest.
Right.
So what I do now is I have one day that's more focused on let's call it general upper body, so shoulders, traps, chest, back. And then I have one more leg focused day where it's quads, hamstrings, but I still do some sets for them, but just not as many. And then I have one more arm focused day where I start with the arm workouts. But that's because I'm trying to bring my arms up a little bit. So I'm giving them more attention, because arm work was always like the last thing I did in the workouts, because you want to get all your compounds out of the way before you start hitting your arms. Like if you do, let's say,
work big to small.
Yeah, like if you do like 6 sets for triceps and then you go and try to do bench presses, you're not going to be able to get up to lockouts. And I'm also moving to more machine and isolation work. So I'm doing a lot more machines, especially for chest and shoulders, and also for legs, to be honest. And then I'm doing a lot of cable work, because I've never done a lot of the cable work before. So I like cable crossover machines, think lat pull downs, just to try and stimulate the muscle in a new way that it hasn't been stimulated. Because like I told you, I can barbell row like 220 pounds for reps. So the issue becomes I just don't get enough work in on my back unless I start doing various other movements.
Well, it's funny. I can't remember. It was one of those guys, I want to say Christian Thibodeau or whatever, but they had mentioned that the reason they liked cables, and I kind of agree with it too, is because it's the only assisted movement where you don't end up using the leverage of the machine to help you lift more. Like all those hammer press machines. Yeah, I'm lifting 4 plates. Well, the machine's technically leveraging 3 of them. You're only lifting 1. But cables, it's kind of one of that. It's as close as you can get to a 1-to-1 ratio of the weight you're lifting versus what you're actually pulling, because it's just like a single cable pulley. I know there's some engineering behind that, but I'm a huge fan of them myself.
Yeah, and also one of the reason I like machines and cables is that you get constant tension through the movement, instead of like if you're doing a barbell. Mm-hmm. You have more muscle activation at one point and almost no muscle activation when you're getting like to the top of the lift. Like with if you think of a bicep curl, you have the maximum amount of activation for like the first, let's say you're doing a 90 degrees, so you're bringing the dumbbell or barbell from a straight arm up to you have the most activation when you go from the bottom of the lift up to about a 45-degree angle out from your body, and then you get less and less activation on the way up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're right, because gravity only ever pulls down. So
that's also one of the reasons I like them. And also because if you're doing the kind of volumes that I'm pushing right now, you kind of want that added safety feature of not fucking yourself up with a barbell.
Yeah, there's always that. I worked most of my life. I was terrified of injury, and I still managed to get injured. Which, I mean, sometimes it wasn't my fault in that, but I'm with you. Like, I am surprised more people aren't worried about injury in their 20s, because there's enough 45-year-old guys out there who have been injured in workouts to kind of tell them what's up. And I can only think it's that what you were saying, that barbell ego is the only reason that guys still think, nah, it's fine. He's just old. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to do one-legged squats for 3 plates on a side. Yeah, one-legged box squats.
Indestructible. Yeah, well, when you're 20, you're indestructible. So that's why, you can do a lot of shit with your body in your 20s that you have to pay for in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. Because, agreed. A lot of ex-military guys have been in operating elements, and those guys are fine in their 20s, but a lot of them are far from fine when they hit their 40s and they've done let's say they've done a couple of 100 jumps out of an airplane.
It's not even just that, even the office work. Like for the RCN, it's generally you have a large office that you're working in, so there's not a lot of physical labor compared to, let's say, infantry guys. But just that the ship constantly smashing down on you with like no support, so you're just basically jumping up and down on a metal bench for 10 years, that starts to wear down on things too.
Yeah, so I think, and also, if you're going to do compounds, I like lower volume just for the sake of safety, because I'm not sure if I've said this on the show. I know I told you this before we went live, that if you're doing deadlifts, you can keep a strict squat or deadlift form fairly easily on 5 reps.
Right.
It's not easy when you're doing 12 reps, and especially not if you're doing like 12 reps for 3 sets and you're on like the last 2 reps or your 3rd set and you're kind of shocked. It's easy to cheat or do something that puts you at an odd angle, and boom, there goes your back.
Oh, I hate that feeling when you hear that, when you feel that ping in your back, but your body's still got enough like endorphins and testosterone running through it from the workout that you're not feeling injured yet, but in your head you just know, like, in an hour I'm gonna die.
Hey, you hear something pop?
Those ones drive me nuts because I've had it happen enough now that I know as soon as I hear that, I'm like, oh, there's 2 weeks gone. I used to think like, oh, I can just work through it because I don't feel the injury yet. And I've learned since that that's the worst thing you could do. As soon as I hear that pop, I just rack the weight and I'm done.
Yeah, I did that on a deadlift workout once. So I popped something in my back. I was doing a warm up. So I think I was doing like maybe 220 or 230 or something just for 10 reps to kind of warm the system up.
Yeah.
And I felt something pop in my lower back. I was like, it doesn't feel that bad. I'll just keep going with the workout. So I knocked out like 3 sets of 3s for 300 plus pound reps. And the next morning I couldn't get out of bed.
Oh, I hate that feeling. Have you ever done like mixed martial arts, jiu-jitsu, taekwondo, any like martial arts stuff there?
No, nothing.
Oh man, worst injury I've ever gotten. Like, I've had back ones like you just had there, but the worst injury ever happened was when I was doing MMA down in Victoria. It would have been the same gym that Sarah Kaufman went to. If you guys don't know her, she's pretty good female MMA. It was Adam Zuzek, his gym. And because I was 200 pounds, they had their 2 little weight classes for training in class. There was 200 and under and 200 and over. So they always lump me with these 270 pound guys. And the one thing I've found with big guys is they're always very clumsy. And so all it would take is one time for them to get me in a mount, and they would drop on my ribs. And this one guy separated 2 of my ribs. I have never had so much pain in my life than the time where it hurt to breathe deeply. I was bedridden for a week, and all I could do was like shallow breaths. And since then, well, there's no follow-up to that story. I just thought it was kind of funny. You were talking about injuries to the point you couldn't get out of bed, because it just reminded me of that one.
Yeah, no, a friend of mine, he actually broke his nose. And that was not a training injury. That was more of a bar injury. But
bar injury.
His main observation from that is you have no idea how often you touch your nose throughout a day until you've broken it. So every time you touch it, you're in excruciating pain.
I can see that. All those little parts of your body. Like I said, I didn't know how much I used my hands for lifting until they started to hurt. Or you said how much you need your lower back until you injure it. I'm starting to wonder. I'm actually curious how much I touch my nose.
Well, just to go through the video for this show, and you just count, and then you multiply that by 24.
Wait, what are we talking about?
If you want to know how often you touch your nose, just go through the video of you on here for an hour, and you see how many times you touch your nose, and you multiply that by 24.
Oh, fair enough. All right, I'll come up with a number, and I'll see about tweeting that out if I can be bothered. It's only recently I've actually been able to watch any of our Red Man groups or Red Mornings episodes. I always felt uncomfortable with it for the longest time.
So I just think the lifting part is important for guys, just to kind of get out there. And it's also something that will help you be more objective with yourself, because like the worst guy you run into in the manosphere is the type of guy that Ryan was trashing before we went on. And that's the type of guy who identifies as something and never does anything that would challenge his ego. Like the guy who's really smart, but if he doesn't catch something right away, he stops doing it just because that would undermine his perception of himself as the smartest guy in the room. And it's with lifting, I mean, you can rationalize a lot of things. Like you can sit at home on your couch at 450 pounds eating Cheetos out of your belly button and think, yeah, I could totally nail 9s and 10s all day if I wanted to, but I don't want to. You can easily rationalize that if you want, but it's very hard. You can't rationalize a barbell off the floor.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of that. Who's the maid singer from Black Flag? That punk band. Damn it! Why am I drawing a blank? Come on, chat, do your thing here. But he has that essay he wrote on that, like the iron never lies. Everybody always quotes it in bodybuilding forums every 6 months, where he talks about how he had such a hard life growing up, and then his coach invited him to learn how to lift weights, and since then he realized it's the only thing that doesn't lie to him in his life. Henry Rollins, that's the one. 7th time's the charm.
Yeah, so I mean that's a true thing of it, and and that's the same reason why some guys should start doing sparring or some form of fighting, because that gives them real feedback. If someone knocks you out, then they were better fighters than you, and getting that feedback allows you to become better. Because negative feedback helps you improve. Just sitting there feeling comfortable in your comfort zone never helps anyone improve.
Oh, it's like Tanner was doing. I was so impressed when he decided to start boxing, just because he didn't want his kids to see his dad, and his dad would have like no comfort around violence. He didn't want to be a weak dad, so he went out there and learned to box. I think he got hit pretty hard too. I remember that big shiner he was showing off on Twitter for a while.
Yeah, well, it's kind of great to get in there, because I mean, a guy like Tanner, I mean, that was like the last guy I thought ever I'd see boxing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it was amazing. I remember when I met him first, it was in 2017 at the 21 convention. And he was what you would think of he was kind of like you, very lean, very thin build, dressed really nicely. But in the year between 2017 and 2018, he got on TRT. He put on 20 pounds of muscle. And you could hear it in his voice. He went from being like the dandy little style guy to he had that American frontier miner like feel to him. It was amazing, the difference. His style had got better because, like you said, the iron is the best tailor around. Like everything he had just fit him better because he would fill out the suit.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's I can't remember who dropped the expression on me the first time, but it's something when you have like really demure men and really domineering women.
Mm-hmm.
And some guy said something like, when they sleep together, he's not getting pussy, she's getting cock.
I like that one. Oh, but here, so let's segue this one now. We have a couple more topics. We've been on lifting and talking about everything but lifting for the longest time here. It was something, and I was really curious because you're uniquely positioned right now to answer it. Rollo calls it being zeroed out when the guy's wife decides to leave him and all of his social circle turns against him. I've had a few clients that are having this problem now. It's that they have to start over and start fresh, either as the married guy who got divorced, lost all of his social circle, has to start from zero, or the typical sad MGTOW apartment guy that really has no friends, no sexual relationships, no plates, and he kind of has to build from zero. I just remember now, since you did your Europe move, and then I like basically moved across the country 3 years ago, we both had to essentially start over from scratch to build everything up. And I figure this would be one of those things that guys could really benefit from hearing.
Well, the major thing that I think it's a lot of guys are scared of that change because a lot of the time you establish a comfortable routine and you just stick with it. Like, even if you're like the guy in the sad MGTOW apartment, you know what I mean? You look forward to getting home and playing on your PlayStation and ordering Domino's and sitting around getting fatter and playing video games and living vicariously through your avatar.
Mm-hmm. No, it's very comfortable.
Yeah, it's very, very comfortable, but it's not a good life. And I think that guy has a great opportunity to turn his life around. It's just a matter of, you know, putting his ducks in a row so he can actually move forward. And that's a big thing I'm writing about in Gendernomics 2, whenever I finish that one. Is, you know, taking a guy from basically zero to actually getting better in life. And a lot of the time there's this, we only see the finished results. We don't see the work a guy put into things. So you see a guy who's muscular, who's well-dressed, who has game, who has plates, who has a good social circle, has a good job, etc. We kind of think, oh, he always had it like that. But everyone had to build it. The building just came more naturally or easier to some other people. Like, if you luck out, and let's say you're athletic by default when you're a kid, you're born early in the year, so you're kind of one of the bigger kids in your sport, so you get some extra attention from that, and you kind of parlay that into being high status in high school, and you get your academics in order, and you can kind of float on that for a long time. So you don't have to build. But then you have a lot of guys who are kind of shortchanged from the start, and they start at a different starting position, but you can get to a pretty close to them in the when you cross the finish line just by putting in the work. You just have to start and work through it methodically and identify, like, okay, what are the big things I have to change? What are the small things I can fix easily? Like, we've said it before, you know, give me $1,000 and 24 hours and I can add like a point or two to any guy's SMV.
Oh, easily. And that quite personifies, I definitely me, but I'd say you too, the way you describe it. Like, I was a fairly late bloomer. I never even had sex until I was 18. Meanwhile, everybody around me was like between 13 and 16. It's really slow starting, but then at 23 with pickup, I kind of picked up some steam, and the compound interest of all these things you're doing in life, doing that, the military, the extra fitness, and my favorite guy in this sphere, I don't know if I've told you this before, is Tate, the Tate brothers. And it wasn't because of all their bragging about what they wear and all that stuff. It was his lunchbox story. You remember that one, right?
Yeah, it's a great story.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, I kind of resonated with that because that's really similar to mine. And one of these guys, when you're talking about guys who were set up for success, maybe they were like older, bigger, that kind of thing. He kind of went the other route. Like, his dad was just brutal to him. He'd get bullied horrible in school, so his dad gave him a lunch pail and said, "Go beat the crap out of the kids and don't come back until you've done it." Essentially, he's forced his kid to grow up fast, and Tate did that. And when I see him talking about, like, I don't care about what, and he has that very aloof attitude where he's completely dismissive of every other guy. And I get that. He's not doing that to brag. He's doing that because he's like, if you haven't had to have a fight with your dad before where he almost beat the crap out of you, like, get out of here with your whining complaints. It turns the volume on life down a notch. And so it encourages you to have your baseline. I don't even know what the word to use is. You essentially try harder because for you, it's a subjective scale. Like, to actually make Tate scared of getting in a fight would probably be a huge difference than making the average Joe Blow off the street getting scared of getting in a fight, because Tate's been knocked out by his dad and he's had, like, God knows how many fights there, and he and Ivan are going to go at it pretty soon.
Yeah, it's like, I love that. And my favorite comment from Tate last time it was on Red Man Group was something about his looks, and he's like, I chose to get punched in the face for a living. I don't give a fuck about my looks.
I had a friend who actually got out of a fight by doing that. He's a big boy. He was like 6'3". He had the rugby player thing. He had one of those Joker scars across his thing, and some guy was like micking off at him, and he's like, "Guy, come on." He goes, "What, man?" He goes, "Come on, look at this face. Look at your face. Do you think I really care?" And the guy actually's like, "All right, fair enough," and he kind of backed off at that point. He used his ugliness to get out of a fight. It was the funniest thing I've ever seen.
But I think it's just a matter of to stay a little bit on topic. I think it's just a matter of a guy needs to start identifying what his desired outcome is, because I think that's the most important thing you can do, is to do like a gap analysis of where you are to where you want to go, and then you can start working on that pragmatically.
Yeah, working backwards from the end.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I dislike the most about the manosphere, or if we should call it something else. I mean, I've heard it referred to as a soyosphere on occasion. So, but anyway, my biggest thing is guys get too ideological about things where they need to be pragmatic. And it's kind of funny because guys want to be all pragmatic when it comes to red pill theory, but then they're like, no, you can only lose weight if you go on a carnivore diet. You can only build muscle on a vegan diet.
Well, it's exactly like you said with smart guys.
And it's like, oh, I intermittent fast 18 hours a day. You only do 17. That's why your version sucks. That can never work. You get no results. All the results come in that 1 hour from 17 to 18 hour intermittent fast. And you just kind of have to sit down and say that, okay, what's important isn't how you get there, it's that you get there. Mm-hmm. So if that means having to, ditch the strong lifts 5x5 or to do isolation, if that means cutting back on red meat, if that means, start using lotion or buying a bunch of horrible shirts, if that takes you towards your desired outcome, then that's the right thing to do. And just focus on doing the right thing, not what everyone thinks you should be. And when I was getting ready or planning the move and figuring out where do I want to live, I went and looked up demographics, because there are certain cities that are better than others for having a lot of women. So let's say you want to look at a city where you have ideally you want more women than men. Mm-hmm. That way the sexual market demographics are in your favor. You want a place where you have at least one or two big colleges, because that's going to make sure you have a feeding mechanism to constantly bring in fresh meats. You want to make sure that it's big enough that you won't run into the one of your plates when you take a new girl out, or where you risk walking into a pub and you fucked 8 of the girls in there, and they're all sitting together around a table having cosmopolitans.
I'd say you want a certain level of affluence too, because I find obesity and the lower economic quintiles tend to be connected. So you definitely want a place that's not a hardcore, and I don't mean to disparage them at all, but from a sexual standpoint, if you're in a hardcore working class environment, there's probably going to be a lot of frumps, even if it has all those other things.
Yeah, you're going to have a lot of frumps in, the lower working class. And, I ended up by accident at like a really hardcore working class beer joint the other day, and you went in there and every girl in there had a Food Plan mom jeans.
Mom jeans are the worst thing ever. Those are the cargo shorts for women. Hate those things. I know they're just hiding a gun underneath that waistline, but whatever.
Yeah, every girl, if she could, would wear hip huggers.
Mm-hmm. But here, so I want to ping something off you here, because I want to get your thoughts. I've had a few clients and a few calls on guys who had this similar problem. Essentially, once they read half of Rollo's book, and then all of a sudden, they can't hang out with their friends anymore because their friends are all blue-pilled. Never mind, put aside the fact that that's clearly some kind of tribal thing. I belong to an edgy rebellion group, so now I want to be, edgy. But at some point, I do agree that you start noticing the difference between people's mindsets. That's the same one as a rich guy. He hates hanging out with poorer people, not because a classist issue. It's because they have a scarcity mentality towards money, and they're just not as fun, and everything's negative. When the guy who's got his life together is generally a positive person. And I've been not struggling, but it's hard to walk somebody from all the way to the end of how you get from the point where all your friends are just soy boys to finding somebody you can hang out with who's more in line with you. Like, obviously, nobody's going to be 100% in line and agree on everything. And the only answer I can really come up with is having more hobbies that would be in line with your higher value. And then eventually people who are that same level of value will start to associate with you, because everybody always likes finding friends. We're generally an isolated society, but I was curious on your thoughts.
Well, I think you have a great point there. Find hobbies, go to places that are more in line with your way of thinking. But I'm not a huge fan of the whole I can only hang out with red pill men now type mentality, because that brings up the risk of ending up in an echo chamber.
Mm-hmm.
Because I see that on Twitter all the time, because post Trump election, there was like an overlap because some manosphere authors decided to, try and start up side hustles as political pundits. And that brought in a lot of the conservative type of evangelical right winger. And that's just not a good fit for, guys who have the problem that, okay, they want to get laid more, or they want, their wives to start putting out again, or they want more sexual market options. And these guys are giving guys shitty advice in order to save the world for their children.
Mm-hmm. You can always spot it too, because they always started off with as a real man, or some measure of, if you want to be this identity, do this thing to get there.
Yeah, and I don't like that, because you can tell that these guys are really isolated and they only deal with other Christian conservatives, because they don't have any, like, they've never had to think about anything. They just kind of adopted a belief system and they go with it. They follow it wherever it leads. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things you have to be able to do is navigate the world, no matter what people you run into. If you put yourself in I can only hang out with people who share my exact political belief, or my exact intersectional dynamics belief, or my particular lifestyle, you kind of rob yourself of a lot of external influences. Like, I deal with blue pill people all day at work on a constant basis, and most of the girls you end up dating are going to be blue pilled as much as a girl can be blue pilled.
Right. That's the thing. And they don't look at it from a value proposition. Like, you take the most blue pilled, effeminate guy you could possibly find. If you're meeting him and you have your act together, chances are there's something about him that's valuable to somebody. Maybe he's really good at whatever job you're doing. And so you have like a mentorship mentee thing there where you can learn from him how to be the best, whatever your job is, making the best widget maker ever. Or let's say he's one of those guys that actually does read about MBTI and knows the stuff. You can actually talk to him about these archetypes. But even though if you know it's BS, but at least you understand it. Like, there's very few situations where there's not something you could learn from somebody. I'd argue, unless you get into that narcissistic, overextended realm where the guy is so busy building his persona, like the smart guy who wants to make sure that being a smart guy is his identity, that he refuses to engage you on a human level. That's the only thing I can't find value in somebody. Because then you're not talking to them. You're just talking to an archetype that they invented that makes no sense anyway.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of the risk a lot of guys run when they reinvent themselves, that instead of reinventing themselves, they invent a new self. And they kind of build this identity that they try to live up to on a constant level, and the identity is perfect, but they're not. And that's where I get into the whole concept of tailoring. And that just comes down to, we give guys kind of a framework for what they should be doing to improve their value. Because we can't go out and do their approaches for them. We can't run the game for them. We give them a framework and a method for improving themselves and their life, but they have to kind of tailor that to their circumstances. It's as simple as, the beach muscles opener keeps coming up. That opener is not going to be useful in every context, in every city, on every girl. Like, you can try and run that in Orlando, and you'll get radically different results than if you try to run it in a small Polish city, or if you try to run it, in Spain, or in countries where the whole one night stands do not happen. And It's very easy to get into this. Yeah, well, a guy who's alpha enough can take a girl home on the first date in any country in the world. No, they can't, because there are some countries where that's just not going to happen, because the cultural and social conditioning of the girls is so strong that they're just never going to let that happen. So you kind of have to do a 1 day, 2 day setup with them to get them back.
Yeah. Well, sticking that conservative thing is the perfect example of it. When you were talking about the conservative guys just have their conservative script and that's what they run. I find the women too, when they talk about how you want to find yourself a nice conservative woman that can defer to you and submit like the Lord wanted. The funny thing I've found is those conservative women, they don't defer or submit to their man. They defer and submit to the rules. And so I find it's a very horrible sense of self when you don't actually want a girl to be into you. You just want to have her into the system that wants you as a plow horse. It just seems, it's almost like the opposite of narcissism. It's the ultimate codependence, or if you want to get all Nietzsche on it, that the ultimate slave morality. And I don't get how guys could even want that. Like, if you're going to start fresh, the last thing you want to do, whether you want to be the edgy red pill punk guy, or whether you want to be the conservative tradition or Christian or Imam Roosh or whatever you want to be, like, why would you change your life script from one master to another master?
It kind of reminds me of, a guy I know, knew from the military, that he refused to salute one of the lieutenant, because this guy was a hardcore lifer. And he'd been in the military since he was 18. And I think it was 30. I'm not sure if he turned 30. It was end of his 20s. But he refused to salute this lieutenant who was fresh out of officer training. Huh. And one of the captains pulled him aside and said, "You're not saluting that little punk bitch. You're saluting the uniform."
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the life script you're referring to. The women, they're not submitting to their husband. They're submitting to the rule set that they've been given. So the ultimate master of them is not their husband. They're submitting to Jesus. They're not submitting to their husband. And that's kind of I think that's a very unhealthy situation for people to get into. And it's very easy to get into it because we've seen it with a lot of guys who've been into the manosphere. They produced some good content. They've made good progress on their journey. And suddenly they find a new master. It's like, take the guys when Jordan Washer, Dick Peterson dropped onto the scene, and all these guys have been making progress. They were in the gym lifting. They were, out there starting to date again. They were starting to get their shit in order. And here comes Jordan Peterson with 12 rules for washing your dick. And suddenly they're back. They switch from, I want to be a red pill man to I want to be a tradcon. And, if your desired outcome is to be married with children in a stable long-term relationships, that's something that the red pill and the methodology can help you with, because it does actually help you with how do you deal with a woman in an LTR as well, because it's the same rules. You just have to dial up the comfort a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like I said something like that in my the post I wrote this week, where the guy who's, if you imagine like alpha and beta as two massive outliers on a scale, and you have the guy who's pure alpha and you have the guy who's pure beta. The guy who's pure alpha is never going to be able to maintain a relationship because he has none of those comfort skills that you have to have in order to maintain a relationship. The guy who's pure beta has all those comfort skills, but he doesn't have any of the attraction traits that the alpha guy does. So he'll never be able to get into the relationship. And that's how you can tell that the sphere is kind of designed to help out the beta guy with too many comfort skills, because it's all about building the attraction skills. There's no
because predominantly men in that stage are less aggressive, less aloof. It's not that we just focus on one half of the spectrum. It's that most guys are on that one half of the spectrum, and we're trying to get them back to a more healthy level of narcissism, or frame, as I call it, or alpha, whatever you want to refer to it as.
I think guys just have to start building themselves up, because I'm not a big fan of the self-esteem movement. I'm a big fan of self-esteem as something you build through trying, failing, and succeeding. Like, if you try, you fuck something up, you try again, you overcome, and that builds confidence. If you're sitting in your house and you have no job, you have no accomplishments, you dropped out of school, you're overweight, you're overweighted, you're underfucked, and you're overdepressed, you don't really have anything to be confident about. At that point, if you confident, it's a kind of fake it if you make it, but it's a paper tiger, for a lack of a better term. It's just a guy who's pretending to be confident because he has nothing backing those accomplishments. And that's why I think lifting is such a great thing, because when you go in there on the first day of strong lifts, you lift like, I think you only work with the bar.
Mm-hmm.
The next week you go back in and you have like the little 5-pound plates or whatever. The next week it's 10-pound plates. And you get these slow progression of successes where you can see that, okay, I'm sticking with something, I'm improving at it, I'm getting better, and that builds confidence.
Right.
So
until you get to that point where when you're lifting 2-3 plates on a deadlift or a squat, and you kind of look at somebody who's making fun of you for being weak or scrawny or that, and you just kind of like, you put in the work so it doesn't really phase you.
Yeah, that's kind of the important thing you have to keep in mind with guys, because that's why I tend to strongly dislike the guys who pop on and chat and are like, oh, I only bang 9s and 10s. I mean, your girl is a 7. Why the fuck are you banging 7? Couldn't get anything better? And it's like, okay, well, if you're banging a 7 and 2 years ago you were banging 2s and 3s, that's like huge progress for you. You're doing much better. Mm-hmm. And who knows? The guy who says he's only banging 9s and 10s is probably a blind dude.
Oh yeah, blind or ego invested. It's always his kink, because I've seen so many. I had a guy actually refer to me as his high quality women, his version of 9s and 10s. Like 34-year-old single mom, a 25-year-old tatted up girl with fake boobs. I'm like, come on, guy. Like, you know me, I always like clustering around the mean. I think all girls are 4s, 5s, and 6s anyway. And then on top of that, if you're with a girl for any length of time, like, everybody gets old. So the ravages of time, yesterday's 9 is tomorrow's 7. So you can't really get mad at a guy. Let's say, I won't mention any names, but picture this guy who's maybe gotten triple-digit notch counts with all kinds of girls ranging from 3 to 10, whatever you want to say. And then he eventually finds one that hasn't had any of the red flags that other girls have. And then maybe they're now in their 40s, and then she's gone. That girl was originally an 8. Now she's kind of a 5, because, I mean, a 45-year-old woman, they don't come in 8s, and that's fine. But then to have a young guy turn around and say, look at you, you couldn't get anything better than this. Like, it's really, I don't even know the proper adjective to attach to that, other than off-putting. Maybe naive.
Well, you know, at that point, the guy is just being a huge bundle of sticks.
Aw, thanks for saving my monetization with that. That's wonderful.
So, well, you know, it's one of those things that kind of piss me off, because we have a lot of guys who are trying to improve, and you have all these guys. So I think they read one chapter in like a mystery book from 2003, and that happened to be the AMOG chapter. Yeah. And now they're around Twitter and chat sections and whatever, and just trying to, you know, knock guys down a peg or two, and you know, let guys build themselves up. And you know, there are enough things out there in the world that will knock you a peg or two down if you fuck up. You don't need, you know, a bunch of guys doing that pro bono on Twitter to make themselves feel better.
That's true. Yeah, I'd always say, play the ball, don't play the man. Like, even if a guy is acting a certain way, if you say, for example, what you're doing is like a bag of sticks or a bundle of sticks, as opposed to you are a bundle of sticks, there's a difference in that between tough love and then, like you said, the knocking down a peg or two.
Yeah, you're engaging in way too much bundle of stickery.
Man, I got to come up with a catchier term for this. Maybe cigarettes. That's the other euphemism, isn't it?
I don't know. We could just find some word in Polish or something and use that instead.
Ooh, I like that. I'll have to learn some Polish here. The only word I know is dupa, and funnily enough, Polish girl I used to work with. She's probably the best female sailor I've ever worked with. She's very good work ethic, probably because she came from Poland. But she used to call me a bundle of sticks for about 6 years, because she thought it was hilarious. Little side story there, no real meaning to it, no lesson learned, but just thought it was funny. But she taught me that dupa means ass. You're like, thanks, that's a minute I'm not getting back.
Yeah, I just think with guys, it's just important to kind of go in your own pace and just kind of try to focus on, you know, pound more lifted, $1 more in the bank, one more girl bang, one hotter girl bang, and just focus on that. And, you know, at some point you're going to have, you know, every guy has to have a slump buster on occasion, or There's the girl you picked up when you had been drinking a bit too much. You come home and you sleep with her, and you're like, oh my God, that girl was a 9. You wake up sober and you notice, oh shit, she only has one arm.
Yeah, hey, you know what? Every now and then you got to go back to the bush leagues till you get recruited again. No shame in that.
And it just kind of goes that way, and I don't see a point. If the guy is making improvements and the guy is getting generally better across time, then stop being a bundle of sticks.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's funny you mentioned that, because it's my second favorite field report from the Married Red Pill. It was this guy. He just got divorced. My favorite one's a 52-year-old guy who basically turned his marriage around. But this guy, he's divorced now, and he realized he got zeroed out. All the friends sided with the wife. The family sided with the wife. He was essentially by himself. And so he started doing the standard thing, like you said, lifting without his ego. He just wanted to get better and in better shape. And then he realized with women, he had no female skills. So he starts learning to attract plates. And at first he got like chubby 45-year-old girls. And he's like, you know what? This one's a 3, but it's better than a 0. And so he started with that. And then he noticed with that plate, and he hit this point where when he was talking to girls, like this girl was a 5 maybe. And she was kind of being ornery about it. And he goes, you know what? I've got a 4 I can call up right now. Why am I wasting my time with this? And so he started building abundance, even with a girl that was arguably not attractive in any sense of the word. Like she was old, she was grumpy, but she was there and she was willing. So he had that in his corner. And then he started noticing, he's like, all of a sudden there's these more attractive girls and I have no problem like hanging with them. And he eventually started upgrading his plates progressively because he always had that one frump in the back corner that, you know what, worst case scenario, at least I got the bag of Cheetos in my house that I could sleep with.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a smart way to go about it, and just focus on the positives and just focus on being better. But one of the things I want to cover too is sometimes you will have to make major life changes if you want. You have to change your context to change yourself, because it's not going to be easy if you're going to radically change who you are, especially for the guys who kind of need to read No More Mr. Nice Guy. If you come from the place where you've been a pushover with no boundaries and everyone is just using you to get whatever they want, at that point, you're probably going to have to move away from that environment to improve beyond a certain limit, because people will start working against you and your improvement effort just because it doesn't fit the image they've constructed in their head of who you are. And you'll get the old, this is not who you are. Why I like the old you better, and so on.
So I agree. People are notorious for that, where they don't want to change their mental model use. They'd rather you just change your behavior to meet theirs.
And, I think moving is also a good thing to do, because once you move, you're kind of free to reinvent yourself more, because there will be limits too. Like if you're, let's say you've lived in the same city as your parents your whole life, or something. Like say you're 30 years old and you just moved out of your mom's basement into another apartment for the first time. You kind of want that freedom to create your personality more in accordance with your tastes.
Mm-hmm.
Because the easy thing is, if you're in a constant environment, it's you tend to fall into a comfortable routine, and you need some level of routine, like we talked to with lifting, just either having your gym bag in the car so that once you're done from work, you go straight to the gym, then you go home, or that type of routine. But if your entire life becomes a routine, you'll stop improving sooner or later, because you've kind of reached the peak improvement you can do in that context. It goes, I heard a quote once: if you're the strongest guy in your gym, find a new gym.
Yeah, it's like, was it Groucho Marx? I wouldn't want to be part of any group that would have me as a member.
Yeah, that's Groucho Marx.
That's the one. The only Marx that was any good with his writing.
Oh, actually, I like Karl. Karl Marx was a good writer. Well, his analysis is on point. It's just that his solution is just it's a little bundle of stickery. It tends to it's a solution, but you don't solve the problem of some people having more than others by killing everyone.
Yeah, that's true. But I was thinking too, so then, I mean, that's the obvious thing. I'm a huge fan of that. The one thing I was blessed with is a stepfather who I absolutely hated, because I moved out of the house as quickly as I could. I got far from him as I quickly could. And it kind of encouraged me. I think that's horrible when, especially, I think it's a single mom thing or like a divorced mom thing, where they want to keep their boy around as long as possible. And so they don't make him hate them enough that he wants to move out and do his own thing. Really do think that's like a That's one of the greatest purposes of fathers later on in life, is to make them hate you so much that you just want to get out of the house.
Never thought about that the way, but I did like the perspective that your dad kicks you out, and then you have to kind of become yourself because you've been ego invested with your parent. I think that's what happens with a lot of the guys. They start off kind of ego invested with their parents.
Yeah.
Then they're ego invested with their high school crew. Then they're ego invested with their wife. And then once the wife divorces them, they have no one to be ego invested with, and they kind of have to look at themselves and try and focus on themselves. And a lot of guys are really uncomfortable with that because they've been focused on they've been given their identity by everyone else for so long that they don't really know who they are. And they kind of have to get to a point where they're comfortable developing their own identity and developing preferences. And that's one of the things that a lot of guys need to work on in relation to women too, to actually have preferences. Get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm not going to sleep with her because she's just not attractive enough for me, and have that preference. Because I've had so many guys come up and dropping that, I just want a girlfriend. Okay, what do you want in a girlfriend? I don't know. I want a girlfriend. And it's like, fuck you, man. I mean, at least have an idea. Do you want, do you want her to be hot, or do you want her to be ugly as sin? Do you want her to be able to cook or not to be able to cook? Do you want her to be pleasant to be around, or do you want her to be a total... Yeah, I'm not going to say that word too. I'm trying to save your mind.
I'll just say high maintenance.
Yeah, so you kind of at least have some degree of preference, and most guys do. So you work with your own preferences. If you're into kind of artsy literature chicks, you may not find them at the club, but you can find them at a bookstore, and just tailor things to that context. And that's why tailoring becomes so important. And I think a lot of guys struggle with the red pill at that point where they've done all the basics. They've got their lifting down. They're in reasonably good shape. They don't dress like they're 12-year-olds heading over for a birthday party. They've stopped living off cereal and candy. They've got their game down, and they've got all these basics sorted, and they kind of have to, and they even learn game to the point where they can comfortably open, run routines, Kino escalate, and so on. And then they have to start kind of figuring out their version of game, because we all have our own version that kind of draws on our strengths, that fits our way of wanting to live life. Like, I fucking hate nightclubs. Can't stand them. So club game was never a big thing for me. So I just had to start doing it in places where I actually wanted to be. So when I do a date now, like I'll tell a girl to meet me somewhere in public, and I'll bounce them to some place that I would go to anyway, even if I didn't have the girl with me. So that way, if the girl flinks, I'm still going to that place. It just so happens I'm going there solo, and I'm going to have to pick up a chick when I'm there, or find someone to talk to. And it's not that complicated.
Yeah, well, it is a little bit, because you mentioned this stuff, and it's all good. And I hear a lot of guys, like I've had a couple clients that do the same thing, that exactly like you said, but they're not being honest with themselves. Like, for example, one wanted to go on a date with this big expensive dinner thing, and he goes, you know what? Even if she doesn't show up, I'd still go there by myself. I'm like, you're not going to go out to medieval times for a date by yourself. Like, nobody does that. So don't make this up. And that's why I really like how you and I both have that similar system of escalating the level of investment based on how worthwhile she is. So like you said, public place to find out she's not fat fishing you. Maybe a coffee house or a museum, because that's $3 and that's, easily enough to walk away, until eventually you get to the point where you're both together at your place. But you don't just start there. And so I find there's that self-awareness part, and that's hard. And that's where I hate to say it, but the guys who take things too literal really struggle with what you just said there, because they assume if I just do exactly what Carl did, I'll have the same results Carl did. But it's not true, because at the same time, you're self-aware enough to know that you're doing this stuff for a reason. And when you say you're going to go to, say, a museum or a pub, you probably would go by yourself, and you have gone by yourself, but you're not deluding yourself into thinking that a $500 dinner at White Castle is something you were going to do if it wasn't for a girl being there.
No, I think that's the kind of thing guys have to get over, because a lot of the guys start off, like, the reason they come and start reading our material is that they've had their ego crushed or injured in some fashion, whether that's being zeroed out in a divorce, whether that's a year-long dry spell, whether that's the girl they've been kind of beta gaming for the better part of 4 years, just got banged by the entire football team in front of them. So they've had their ego to some extent crushed or injured somehow, and they come to us to kind of help rebuild it. And one of the things that they need to kind of work beyond their rationalizations and their own mindset. And it's why I think a lot of people can benefit from working with a personal trainer.
Right.
Because then you have someone who tells you exactly what to do and when to do it, and you have to do it. So they are kind of in control, and you just do what they tell you to. And I think that's what a lot of guys have been doing. And then the person who's been telling them what to do isn't there anymore. But once the person isn't there anymore, then you have to take what you learned from them and work with that. And you have to say, okay, my personal trainer told me to do this. That's because of this. And they have to understand that. And then they have to develop their own preference for what outcomes do I want from my training. And the guys who takes things a little bit too literally just have to get to the point where they actually develop their own personality, their own preferences, their own tastes. And a lot of what we do is take guys from being kind of you have this great thing about guys being supporting actors in their own life.
Right.
But most of the guys, they're not even supporting actors, they're extras. They're just
they're the flower pot in the backstage left.
Yeah, and they have no character. They have no. They don't have their own personality, so to speak. Their personality is an amalgamate of everyone who's around them, and being alone gives you that freedom and forces you to kind of define your own personality, because you start to, when you go out shopping for a simple thing like food. If you're shopping with, let's say, a wife or a girlfriend, you're not buying exactly what you would want. It always becomes kind of a mix between your tastes and their tastes. Mm-hmm. When you're living with your parents, you're eating what your mom buys most of the time. So once you go out shopping for yourself, you have to start, okay, I like this better than that. I want this more than that. And once you start making those little preferences, that builds into bigger preferences. So the guy who starts off with, I just want a girlfriend, any girl will do. Even, the Gillette Venus ad girl. And then they start moving from there to, okay, maybe I want a girl I prefer girls who are blonde. I prefer girls with longer hair more than girls with shorter hair. And they kind of builds on that until they have a full-fledged set of preferences that they defend with healthy boundaries.
I would add to that, though, and it's a small caveat, so don't take this as like that's bullshit. But getting outside your comfort zone as well, because it's something that's really resonated with me when I was actually hearing middle-aged soccer moms talking about this. How a guy's preference isn't learning to get what he wants; it's learning to want what he's got. So, like you were saying, if you like artsy girls, chances are it's probably because the only girl that ever showed him attention was an artsy girl, and so he turns that into his preference. And I know it's something you kind of intuitively know, but I feel like it has to be spelled out because, like you said, a lot of people are way too literal. But if you're into only artsy girls, try out a bar chick once or twice. So at least you don't like it. Not just because you've never been able to get one and you want to be sour grapes, but because you've tried it and you don't like it. I would say that also works in a sexual sphere, because there's many things that I've tried that I refuse to do again because I don't like them. Like being whipped, not a fan of it. I think being pegged is the only thing I haven't tried yet to say I don't like it, but I'm willing to make an exception for that.
I don't know. You seem like the type of guy who would have tried that already. I'm actually quite surprised.
Yeah, I know. See, it's funny. I kind of knew. Like, I bet you this is where he's going to take this, and you didn't disappoint, so I'm very proud of you.
Yeah, you kind of baited me into it.
There's that. I got, you know what? I'm not even going to tell those stories. Going well here. But the whole thing, it ties into, I like to refer to it as hypothetical or conditional imperatives. And I think that's a nice little tie-in for everything we've been talking about here. So, for example, for the guys who don't know what this is, a hypothetical one would be, if you want an artsy girl, then go to where artsy girls hang out. as opposed to a categorical one with, if you're a real man, you would XXX. And that's kind of, I find that's one of the red pill distinctions you got to make on everything. When people refer to alpha males or beta males or Chad and all this stuff, they always say it as if it's some kind of, this is Jesus, so you want to act like Jesus, Chad, or AJ, whatever you want to call him. As opposed to, if you want this, then it's probably best if you have this set of ideals, morals, or imperatives behind you.
Well, I wanted to get into this because I kind of, something just hit me here with, if you look at Tate, he has a very, very strong set of alpha qualities. And one of the things that I think a lot of guys think is when we call someone beta, we're insulting them or denigrating them. And that's not the case at all. All we're doing is making an observation that this guy has a lot of traits that are not conducive
They're comfort building.
Action, but they're good at comfort building. So with Tate, if you see the things that stick out the most with him is he has very solid preferences. He knows what he wants. And B, he has very solid boundaries that he enforces. And with all girls, he has that perspective like, okay, if she wants to be with me, she has to live up to my preferences. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I'll find another girl who will. And once you get to that point, then you have most of your problems behind you because you're at the point where you have the 3 in the phone list that you can call up and bang if nothing else comes through, but you can still go out and try and nail 4s, 5s, 6s, and 7s.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of get to that point and just figuring out how do you get there and what man do you want to be, because that we can provide a generic framework, but you have to adapt that to how you want your life to be. Like if you don't want to live in a city, you want to live out in the countryside. Okay, you're going to have less women. How can you use this framework in a small town? How can you use this framework if you're traveling a lot? And that was one of the things I was talking to when I popped in with John over on his seminar. Like one of the guys was, I travel a ton for work. How would you do your Tinder game? And what I used to do is I'd put my bio would basically be the dates I would be somewhere. And I would start swiping in a city, like anything from 7 to 3 days before I was going there. And I was like, I always like exploring new places. If there's something I absolutely have to see in your city, swipe right to tell me. And a lot of guys,
that's a wonderful setup.
And a lot of girls would swipe right and just open me with, oh, you're coming to my city, you really have to see XYZ. And it would be like, oh, well, that sounds like fun. Tell me more about it. And they'd start telling more and investing more in selling their city, because that's one thing with, especially if you're traveling in America, because most American chicks are really, really patriotic about their little slice of the American life. So they'll kind of sell you hard on their city. And then once they're invested in getting you to go there, you just invite them to come along and show you.
Interesting.
And that way you're making it easy for them to open you.
Mm-hmm. And that's funny. In Canada, it works similar to that. At least in my experience, is that most people don't do the things from their city. So if you're in Toronto, if you've lived in Toronto, you've probably not been up the CN Tower. But thing is, when you'd have, let's say if I was, a girl and I was swiping a guy like you, you're like, yeah, what's to do in Toronto? It's kind of my excuse to, hey, you know what? There's all these things that are right outside my backyard that I've never done. This gives me an excuse to do them too. So it's funny that, the people here aren't as patriotic about their namesake cities and that, but it still seems to work regardless.
Yeah, so I just like that approach. And it just plays to kind of the psychology of the person who's swiping, mm-hmm. and the psychology of me. Because I know once I have a girl out, I'll be able to escalate that comfortably. And once I get a girl back to my place, I know it's a done deal. In the last 5 years, I only had a girl back to my place once and not slept with her. And the only reason that happened was because she'd had way too much to drink and she threw up in my bed.
Oh, you poor thing.
Sexy about making out with a chick who tastes like vomit.
I'm gonna guess this had to do with that northern UK tweet you gave out a couple months back, where.
Yep.
That's funny too, because I think Tate and John have said the same thing. I don't know what it is about the northern UK, but the women they're describing are just nasty.
Well, it's like northern UK chicks will piss your bed.
I've never heard of a girl doing that until you guys, by the way. Like, I've had a few sailors that I've worked with that have said, yeah, when I first got together with this girl, I got drunk and I peed her bed. A lot of them even got married out of it, so it's weird. It wasn't even a deal breaker for the girls. But I've never heard of a girl doing that. Weird. Yeah, it's very weird. Well, you meet all types. So one thing, if nothing else, the one thing I would take as a bonus from the military is you meet the entire demographic of your country as a whole. Like, I would have never been in any organization where I could meet Newfies from the Rock, East Coasters, Montrealers, some small town, Saint Denis, Quebecois, West Coasters from BC, and some guy from the middle of a farm in the prairies. Like, you don't get these guys in the same room together in many places, and I'd say the military is one of the few that you can.
And that's one of the reasons to go back to tie a few things together. I think that's one of the reasons why you should get out and not just hang out with Red Pill guys. I enjoy doing this, and I enjoy doing the Red Man group because it's one of the few times in a week where I actually do hang out with Red Pill guys. Most of the time I'm with normies. And, that's not a bad thing because you have to learn how to deal with normies. If I talked like I talk when I'm on these shows in normal life, I wouldn't get laid ever.
I can see that.
I still have the same sense of humor, the darkness, the dry puns and whatever, but it's not quite as aggressive, so to speak, because you have to kind of adapt to your audience. Like, you can't tell a girl on Tinder, you swiped right on me because of A, B, C, and hypergamy.
Oh, God, yeah. Nothing they hate more than having a guy spout the rules if some referee's going to give him the point. All right, point him, head back to his place. Thanks, coach.
It's like girls want to play the game. They don't want you to tell them the game.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. That's why I laugh, too, when a lot of guys talk about they have too much integrity to lie to a girl when they're out. And I'm like, you're not really lying, though. You're building a story. You're telling her a story. It's the same as wrestling. They're not lying. They are being physical, and they are beating the crap out of each other. The only thing is it's slightly scripted for you to enjoy it more than just two guys hitting each other over the head with chairs. Like, if anything, they're doing you a favor. They're taking life, and they're making it more interesting.
And the whole lying thing kind of gets on my nerves, too, because I don't lie when I run game. I frame things in a certain way so that it's interpreted in a certain way. I'm just going to find a DM here because I had a great example of that
Ooh.
in one of my DMs here. I'm just going to go past the one where I'm trash talking people. Let's see, not there. Yeah, like if a girl on Tinder and any other situation is like, hey, I'm looking for something serious. What are you looking for? I usually tell them something like, I want to meet someone who I want to continue meeting. And she can interpret that as, I'll want a girlfriend, but I do want to keep meeting her, but I just want to keep meeting her to bang. So she can read whatever she wants to into that statement, and I'm not lying. I'm just not explicating. And that's kind of the thing that I see with a lot of the girls once they start to get to the point where they're like, okay, I really need to lock down a man and start popping out kids and getting that house in the suburbs. Yeah. Then they stop being indirect and start being really direct. Like, I'm going to need your tax return and your last 3 paychecks, and we're going to have to do a credit check. And where do you see this relationship going?
Well, that's funny. That's a total married red pill thing we've noticed too, is that when girls, it's called a main event, and girls are used to sub communication. And by the time they get to a direct communication level, it's because they really can't control their beta male husband anymore. And so they're really just out of options. So by the time the girl gets direct, it's almost as bad as an ultimatum at that point. Like, she's going against all of her hardwiring to be direct.
Yeah, and it's just, they do it when they have to. They have to be forced. And it does it very easy because it's so much fun when you see the girls from marketing go to IT support. Because normally these girls wouldn't give that guy the time of day. But when they go and talk to IT support, they switch to talking IT support's language. Because the guy has and the guy has what they want. So they switch to his language. And what you also have to keep in mind, a lot of this shit on, especially on the apps, like if a girl is like, I'm not interested in one night stands. Like if a girl has no one night stands in her bio, you can fuck her on the first date. Because what she's doing with that, she's trying to communicate, hey, I'm not that type of girl. And B, she's trying to kind of, why do I keep fucking all these guys on the first date? I have to put in my bio that I'm not into one night stands because this is becoming a pattern.
You know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of exactly what you were talking about the smart guy who refuses to try anything new because he's afraid of moving his image of being smart. The girl there, I'm a nice girl. I don't know why this keeps happening to me. It's not my fault. It's the same thing.
Yeah. Same thing with the girl who puts, I'm only on here looking for a serious relationship. Usually what that means is she's worried that either her girlfriends are going to see her profile or someone she knows is going to see her profile and figure out, oh, she's there to hook up. So they have to explicate, I'm only here looking for the future father of my children. I'm a nice girl. Even if there are 4 pictures of me in a thong bikini on my profile.
Yeah. Which is and once you realize that, who's the audience of this thing? And she's obviously, girl's going to be worried about her reputation above all. You just assume that. But then if she's on Tinder, I mean, how much of a stronger signal do you need that she's not there? Like, if she wanted to find a nice Christian boyfriend to settle down and have 8 kids with, she'd probably be on Match.com or one of those. But she's on Tinder.
Well, there are girls who go on Tinder to find long-term relationships. It's kind of a dual purpose. Like, a girl is never going to say, I just wanted to get fucked that night. When she gets dolled up and she goes to the club in a miniskirt, she's not going there to get fucked. She's going there to dance with her girlfriends or to listen to music or to relax after a hard week of work. It's not like with us. I mean, if you ask one of your friends, what are you doing Saturday? Well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to try and get some pussy. Like, the girls are not heading out to try and get some dick. Girls do not say that explicit. They always have to have that one excuse. It's kind of like guys work the best and trade information the best when we're doing something. Like if you're just talking to a guy while you're doing cold knuckle push-ups in the shower or some shit. Get good guy communication when you're doing something together, ideally something physical. And girls are the same way. They need an excuse for what they're actually doing. So they'll never explicate. And that in itself is sort of a shit test. It's like, does the guy get it or does he take me literally and do exactly? Does he not match with me if I say I'm... Because the only guy who's going to not match with a girl because she has no one-night stands in her bio is going to be the beta. Who's like, oh shit, I was hoping she was, only here for one-night stands. I was looking for that shit. Why can't I find that girl?
That is funny. Since coming online and doing this stuff in social media, I gotta say, it's the one thing I can't fault them for. Because the overly literal guys are the most frustrating people to deal with. It's almost like anytime you want to make any statement, any opinion, this works because of this reason, you always have to preface it with the 1,500 exceptions to the rule. Well, not if an alien attacks, then yeah, maybe whatever. And there's always like the most ridiculous hypotheticals. Well, what if I earn 115 billion and she tries to take half of that? I'm like, that is not going to happen. Why are we even discussing this? Well, if your example doesn't work 100% of the time, I'm like, oh, okay. I think I just need to say I'm only here for a serious boyfriend on my Twitter profile now.
It just comes down to girls will never be girls are never explicit about anything unless they absolutely have to be. Like when they sit you down and have the where is this going talk, that's because they have no idea where it's going. They want it to go in one direction and you're not giving them any signal either way.
Yeah.
That's why I kind of make sure that whenever I'm with a plate or something, I try to drop in something about other girls or, looking for a threesome and shit like that, just to kind of signal to them, like, don't get girlfriendy with me.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, that's all it takes is a couple things like that, or especially because once you get to the point that where are we going, at that point, if you're going to be honest, you're just going to say it's not going anywhere. This is fun and I'm staying here. It's probably going to scare her off as opposed to, like you said, if you just drop it on early, that gives her an opportunity to either opt in or opt out, but you're not going to get those hurt feelings afterwards. And you're not going to get, problem with hurt feelings on a girl and these kind of things is those can end up getting messy. So why even risk it?
Well, the best thing with having a full pipeline, like when you can regularly meet and date girls, is that you can be much more discerning. And if the girl isn't acting up to your preferences, you just exit early and go home, or go looking somewhere else. Just for the point that you don't need to sit there and kind of follow her script for how things are going to play out. You have your own script. You push that script through. And if she doesn't comply with it, you find someone who will. And I think that's kind of the lesson from Tate from last week, that you just kind of have to, girls have to fit with what you want from them. Like if you're dating a girl and all you want is a plate or a one-night stand, and she starts talking about you meeting her parents, you have very different perspectives. Now that can be a shit test, and it cannot be, because girls don't tend to explicitly say that unless you have gotten to a certain point. So if she's doing that too early, it's a shit test. If she's doing it too late, later on, it's probably at least somewhat serious. So you just figure out what you want and use that as a guide for what would be your optimal outcome. And if you start to see massive deviations, you have to correct that somehow. That's either going to be try and push the girl you're with to go with the way you want it to go, or you're going to have to find another girl.
Yeah, well, hey, I mean, at the very least, there's 3.5 billion women out there. At least some of them have to be attractive. If you can't have the abundance to move on from deal breakers, then what's the point? But you brought up a good point, too. We're running at the end of time here. We got Red Man Group in about 15. I'm going to switch over to Scotch and have another coffee or two. Carl, I'm going to see you in a couple minutes then, all right?
Okay, see you.
All right, guys. We'll see you in 15 on Red Man Group.